A black boy helped an elderly man carry his groceries up without expecting anything in return. The next day, a helicopter landed in front of his neighborhood, and when his mother saw who stepped out, her face turned pale as snow. What happened next would change their lives forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Jordan trudged down the crumbling sidewalk, his worn backpack heavy on his shoulders. The project buildings loomed around him, gray and imposing in the late afternoon light. The heat from the summer sun beat down mercilessly, making the air thick and heavy. He was heading back from his shift at the corner store, exhausted but grateful for the few dollars in his pocket. His family needed every cent they could get. The neighborhood was alive with its usual afternoon bustle. Kids played basketball on the cracked court nearby, the rhythmic bounce of the ball echoing off concrete walls. Music drifted from open windows, mixing with the sounds of distant sirens and the rumble of buses on the main street. Jordan kept his head down, focused on getting home. As he rounded the corner near the local grocery mart, its neon sign flickering weakly in the daylight, he spotted an elderly man struggling with several heavy bags. The man was leaning heavily on his cane, a polished wooden thing that seemed out of place in this part of town. He was trying to manage both it and the groceries while eyeing the steep stairs to the apartment building. His face was pinched with pain and effort, beads of sweat rolling down his temples. Jordan hesitated, his feet rooted to the spot. In this neighborhood, people were quick to judge, quick to assume the worst. He could already hear the whispers. That Williams boy, probably looking to steal from that old man. The weight of those assumptions had followed him his whole life, making him second-guess every interaction. But something in the way the elderly man's hands trembled made Jordan push aside his doubts. "Excuse me, sir?" Jordan called out softly, trying to make his voice as unthreatening as possible. "Need some help with those?" The old man startled, his grip tightening on his cane. He looked at Jordan with wary eyes, the kind of look Jordan had grown used to seeing. But then something in his expression softened, like ice melting in the sun. "Well," he said, his voice carrying a slight accent Jordan couldn't place, "if you wouldn't mind. These stairs seem to get steeper every year." Jordan stepped forward, carefully taking the bags. They were heavier than he expected, filled with cans and fresh produce. The plastic handles cut into his palms, but he adjusted his grip without complaint. "I got them, sir." "Which floor?" "Fourth," the man replied, and Jordan tried not to wince. Of course, it would be the top floor in a building with no elevator. Just his luck. As they climbed, Jordan matched his pace to the old man's careful steps. The stairwell was dark, lit only by flickering fluorescent bulbs that cast strange shadows on the graffiti-covered walls. The air was stale, heavy with the scent of old cigarettes and cleaning supplies. The old man's breathing grew labored, but he kept going, one step at a time. "I'm Dr. Park," the man offered between breaths, pausing briefly to rest. "Retired now, but I still prefer the title. Spent 40 years as a surgeon at Metropolitan Hospital. Now I can barely manage my groceries." He chuckled, but there was a note of sadness in it that made Jordan's heart twist. Jordan nodded, shifting the bags to his other arm. "I'm Jordan," he said simply, not wanting to say too much. In this neighborhood, it was better to keep to yourself. The less people knew about you, the less they could use against you. They finally reached the fourth floor, and Dr. Park pointed to apartment 4C. Jordan set the bags down carefully by the door, making sure nothing would topple over. He noticed the apartment door was well maintained compared to others, with a small Chinese character painted in gold near the peephole. "Thank you, young man," Dr. Park said, reaching for his wallet with slightly trembling hands. "Let me give you something for your trouble." Jordan backed away, shaking his head. "No need, sir. Just wanted to help." He turned quickly, not waiting for a response, and headed back down the stairs. He could feel Dr. Park's eyes on him until he disappeared around the corner. The old man's surprised expression burned into his memory. When Jordan finally got home to their small apartment, his mother was at the kitchen table, surrounded by bills. Her eyes were red, and her hands shook slightly as she sorted through the papers. The overhead light cast harsh shadows on her face, making her look older than her 40 years. Jordan's heart sank. He knew that look all too well. "Everything okay, Mama?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. The pile of envelopes marked "Final Notice" told him everything he needed to know. She looked up, trying to force a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Just the usual, baby. Don't you worry about it." The same words she always said, her voice heavy with the weight of things left unsaid. But Jordan did worry. He saw the past due notices, heard the whispered phone calls when she thought he was asleep, watched his mother skip meals so his little sisters could eat. He was only 16, but he felt the weight of their struggles like a physical thing pressing down on his shoulders. He pulled out the money from his pocket, his day's earnings from the corner store, and placed it on the table. His mother's eyes welled up, but she took it without a word. They both knew it wasn't enough, but it was all they had. That night, Jordan lay in bed, listening to the distant sounds of the city through his cracked window. He thought about Dr. Park and those heavy grocery bags, about the gold character on his door, about the sadness in his voice when he talked about his surgeon days. Jordan hadn't expected anything in return for helping. It was just the right thing to do. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something about that encounter felt different, like a shift in the air before a storm. He had no idea how right he was, or how much his life was about to change. The next morning, Jordan woke early to help his sisters get ready for school. The sun hadn't risen yet, casting their small apartment in a dim, bluish light. As he made their breakfast with what little they had, some oatmeal and the last of the milk, he heard an unfamiliar sound growing louder outside. A deep, rhythmic thumping filled the air, making the windows rattle in their frames. His little sisters, Keisha and Aisha, ran to the window, their eyes wide with excitement. "Jordan! Jordan! There's a helicopter!" Keisha shouted, pressing her face against the glass. Jordan frowned, joining them at the window. In their neighborhood, helicopters usually meant trouble, police searches or medical emergencies. But this was different. The helicopter was massive, sleek, and painted a pristine white. It circled once, then began to descend toward the empty lot across from their building. "Get away from the windows," their mother called, rushing into the room. She looked pale, her hands clutching the doorframe. "Jordan, get your sisters ready for school. Now." But before they could move, the helicopter landed, its rotors stirring up clouds of dust and debris. The noise was deafening, drowning out the usual morning sounds of their neighborhood. People began gathering on the street, pointing and whispering. Through the settling dust, Jordan could see the helicopter's door slide open. A man in an expensive suit stepped out, followed by several others in similar attire, but it was the last person who made Jordan's breath catch in his throat. Dr. Park emerged from the helicopter, standing tall despite his age, with no cane in sight. He wore a crisp military uniform adorned with medals, his silver hair neatly combed. This wasn't the same frail old man Jordan had helped yesterday. This was someone else entirely. "Mama," Jordan said, turning to his mother, "that's the man I helped with the groceries." His mother's face went pale as snow. "That's General Park," she whispered. "The one they talk about on the news? The one who—" She didn't finish her sentence. The man in the expensive suit was walking toward their building, his eyes scanning the windows until they landed on their apartment. He pulled out a phone and made a brief call. Moments later, their ancient intercom crackled to life. "Would the Williams family please come down? General Park would like to speak with you." Jordan's mother grabbed his arm, her fingers digging in. "What did you do, Jordan?" "What's happening?" "Nothing, Mama. I swear. I just helped him with his groceries, that's all." The intercom buzzed again. "Please, Mrs. Williams, the general insists." Jordan's sisters huddled close to their mother, their eyes wide with fear. The neighborhood had gone eerily quiet, everyone watching, waiting to see what would happen next. His mother straightened her shoulders, smoothing down her worn house dress. "All right," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "We'll go down, but we stayed together, no matter what." They made their way down the creaking stairs, Jordan leading the way. Each step felt heavier than the last. Through the building's grimy entrance, they could see the crowd that had gathered, held back by men in dark suits and earpieces. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. When they stepped outside, the morning air felt electric. General Park stood by the helicopter, his hands clasped behind his back, watching them approach. The man in the expensive suit moved to meet them halfway. "Mrs. Williams," he said, his voice smooth and practiced. "I'm Mr. Reynolds, General Park's Chief of Staff. The General would like to thank your son personally for his assistance yesterday." Jordan's mother gripped his hand tighter. "My son was just being polite. He didn't know." "Exactly." General Park's voice carried across the space as he walked toward them. His accent was more pronounced now, his bearing military straight. "He didn't know who I was, and he helped anyway. That's precisely why I'm here." The crowd pressed closer, straining to hear. Jordan could see his neighbors' faces, a mix of curiosity and concern. Some had their phones out, recording everything. "Young man," General Park said, looking directly at Jordan, "yesterday you showed me something rare in this world. Kindness without expectation. Respect without recognition." He paused, his eyes scanning the rundown buildings around them. "I've spent my life trying to identify potential, and you, Jordan Williams, have it in abundance." Jordan swallowed hard, unsure what to say. His sisters peeked out from behind their mother, their eyes fixed on the helicopter gleaming in the morning sun. The world seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what would happen next, and Jordan knew, deep in his bones, that his life was about to change forever. The office inside the helicopter was surprisingly spacious, with leather seats and polished wood panels. Jordan sat across from General Park, trying not to fidget. His mother sat beside him, her back straight, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Through the window, he could still see the crowd outside, growing larger by the minute. "I must apologize for the theatrics," General Park said, removing his uniform jacket to reveal a crisp white shirt. "But sometimes a message needs to be delivered with impact." He pressed a button, and a young woman entered with a tray of water and coffee. "Mrs. Williams, Jordan, please help yourselves." Jordan's mother shook her head politely, but her eyes kept darting between the general and the door, as if calculating an escape route. Jordan understood her unease. In their world, nothing came without strings attached. "Let me be direct," General Park continued, his expression serious. "Yesterday, when I was doing my monthly neighborhood check, yes, I still live in that apartment, it keeps me grounded, I saw something remarkable. A young man who helped without hesitation, despite the prejudices that might have held him back. He pulled out a manila folder and placed it on the table between them. "Jordan, I've had my people look into your background. Straight A student, despite working part-time. Captain of the debate team until you had to quit to help support your family. Taking care of your sisters while your mother works 2 jobs. Jordan's mother stiffened. "You've been investigating my son?" "With good reason, Mrs. Williams." General Park opened the folder, revealing documents and photographs. "I run a foundation that identifies promising young people and gives them the opportunities they deserve. But I don't just look at grades or achievements. I look for character." He pulled out a photograph, Jordan helping him with the groceries taken from a security camera. "This moment right here. You didn't know who I was. You didn't want recognition or reward. You simply saw someone who needed help." Jordan shifted uncomfortably. Anyone would have done the same. "No," General Park said firmly. They wouldn't. I've spent 40 years in military intelligence and another 20 in humanitarian work. I know people, Jordan. I know how rare true kindness is. He pulled out another document, sliding it across the table. This is an offer. Full scholarship to any college of your choice. A stipend for your family so you can focus on your studies. Internship opportunities at my foundation. A chance to break the cycle. Jordan's mother's hands began to shake. This is too much. We can't possibly. You can, General Park interrupted gently. Because I was once where Jordan is now. A poor boy in South Korea helping an American soldier with his bags. That soldier saw something in me, just as I see something in your son. He sponsored my education, helped me build a new life. Now, it's my turn to pass that forward. Outside, Jordan could hear his sister's excited voices as Mr. Reynolds showed them the helicopter. The sound of their laughter mixed with the murmur of the crowd, creating a surreal backdrop to this moment. Why? Jordan finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Why me? General Park leaned forward, his eyes intense. Because potential isn't just about grades or talent. It's about the heart. Yesterday, you showed me your heart, Jordan. And I believe it's strong enough to carry you wherever you want to go. He pulled out one more document. This isn't charity. This is an investment in the future. Your future. But it comes with responsibility. If you accept, you'll be expected to maintain your grades, participate in mentorship programs, and eventually help others as you've been helped. Jordan looked at his mother, seeing the tears in her eyes. He thought about all the nights she came home exhausted, about his sisters sharing worn-out clothes, about the dreams he'd pushed aside because they seemed impossible. Can I? He started, then cleared his throat. Can I think about it? General Park smiled, warm and genuine. Of course, take all the time you need, but remember, Jordan, sometimes life gives us moments that change everything. The trick is recognizing them when they come. As if on cue, Keisha's delighted squeal echoed from outside as she presumably discovered something new about the helicopter. The sound seemed to break the tension, and Jordan's mother let out a shaky breath. Thank you, she said softly. Just thank you for seeing him, for really seeing him. General Park nodded, understanding in his eyes. Sometimes all anyone needs is for someone to look past the surface and see their true worth. He stood, signaling the end of the meeting. Take the documents home. Review them. My contact information is inside. Whatever you decide, Jordan, know that yesterday you proved something important. Not to me, but to yourself. As they prepared to leave the helicopter, Jordan paused. Sir? Those groceries yesterday, were they really just groceries? General Park's eyes twinkled. Sometimes, Jordan, a test of character isn't about the task itself. It's about how we choose to handle it. Back in their cramped apartment, the helicopter's presence still reverberating through the neighborhood, Jordan sat at the kitchen table with his mother, the folder open between them. His sisters had finally been convinced to go to school, though they couldn't stop talking about their helicopter adventure. $20,000 a year, his mother whispered, staring at the stipend figure. Plus full college tuition. Jordan, this is too good to be true. Jordan finished, his voice tight. He ran his fingers over the glossy brochure from the Park Foundation, showcasing successful graduates from their program. Young people who looked like him wearing suits and bright smiles, standing in front of impressive buildings. A knock at the door made them both jump. Jordan's mother quickly gathered the papers, hiding them under a newspaper before opening the door. Mrs. Thompson from next door stood there, her eyes wide with excitement. Lisa, Mrs. Thompson said, using his mother's first name with unusual familiarity. The whole neighborhood's talking. A helicopter, and General Park himself, you know he's a billionaire, right? Made his fortune in technology after leaving the military. They say he's some kind of genius. Jordan watched his mother force a polite smile. Yes, well, it was just a brief meeting, nothing's been decided. But Mrs. Thompson wasn't finished. "My cousin works at the hospital," says Dr. Park, General Park, either wherever he goes by. "Comes in disguise sometimes to check on things, like a secret boss. And now he's interested in Jordan." She leaned in closer, lowering her voice. "You better be careful, though. People are already talking, saying it ain't natural, a boy from here getting noticed like that." Jordan felt his stomach twist. He'd already heard whispers in the hallway, seen the suspicious glances from neighbors who'd never given him a second look before. Even Mr. Davis, who usually just grunted when Jordan passed his door, had stopped him to ask what kind of business he was getting into. His mother must have sensed his discomfort because she straightened up, her voice firmer. "Thank you for your concern, Margaret. But we need to discuss this as a family." After Mrs. Thompson left, Jordan's mother sank into a chair, looking exhausted. "Maybe we should wait," she said softly. "Think about it more. People around here don't like when someone tries to rise above their station." Jordan pulled out the photo of him helping Dr. Park. "But that's just it, Mama. I wasn't trying to rise above anything. I was just helping someone who needed it." His mother reached across the table, taking his hand. "I know, baby, that's who you are, who I raised you to be, but the world—" She trailed off, then squeezed his hand. "The world isn't always kind to people like us, especially when we get opportunities others think we don't deserve." A commotion outside drew them to the window. A group of teenagers from the building, some who Jordan had grown up with, were gathered near the spot where the helicopter had landed. One of them, Marcus, looked up and caught Jordan's eye. The hostility in his former friend's gaze made Jordan step back. "They're just jealous," his mother said, but her voice trembled slightly. "We need to be careful, Jordan. Success can make you a target in places like this." Jordan nodded, understanding the weight of her words. He'd seen it before. Anyone who showed signs of moving up, of breaking free from the neighborhood's gravity, became a target for resentment and suspicion. The papers on the table seemed to mock him. Here was his chance, everything he'd dreamed of, but accepting it meant more than just taking an opportunity. It meant standing out, becoming visible in a place where invisibility was often the safest choice. "I need some air," Jordan said suddenly, grabbing his jacket. His mother started to protest, but he was already heading for the door. "I'll be careful, Mama. Promise." The hallway felt different now, charged with an energy he couldn't quite name. Mrs. Rodriguez's door opened as he passed, and he caught her quickly closing it, no doubt rushing to call someone about his movements. The whispers seemed to follow him down the stairs, each step echoing with the weight of his decision. Outside, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the spot where the helicopter had landed. A few kids were playing there now, arms spread wide, making whooshing sounds as they pretended to take off. They stopped when they saw Jordan, their eyes wide with a mixture of awe and uncertainty. He walked past them, head down, hands in his pockets, feeling the neighborhood's eyes on him. Everything looked the same. The same broken sidewalks, the same graffiti-covered walls, the same tired faces behind windows. But something had shifted. In the space of a morning, he had become something else. A symbol, a target, a possibility. The weight of the opportunity in that folder upstairs pressed down on him like a physical thing. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about his family, his future, and maybe something even bigger. The chance to prove that sometimes, just sometimes, doing the right thing could change everything. Jordan walked through the neighborhood until his feet brought him to the local community center. The building was old but maintained with pride, one of the few places that offered real hope in their area. Inside, he heard the familiar sound of basketballs bouncing on hardwood floors. Mr. Washington, the center's director who'd known Jordan since he was a kid, was sitting at his usual spot behind the front desk. His eyes widened when he saw Jordan. "Well, if it isn't our local celebrity," Mr. Washington said, but his tone was kind, lacking the edge Jordan had been hearing from others. "Come here, son. Let's talk." Jordan followed him into his small office, taking the worn chair he'd sat in countless times before when seeking advice. The walls were covered with photos of neighborhood kids who'd made it out. College graduates, athletes, business owners. Jordan had always looked at those photos with a mix of hope and resignation. "So," Mr. Washington began, leaning back in his chair. "A helicopter, huh? General Park himself. Man's a legend in certain circles. Did you know he funds half the medical programs in the city? Keep it quiet, though, real quiet." Jordan shook his head. "I didn't know anything about him. He was just an old man who needed help with his groceries." Mr. Washington smiled. And that's exactly why he chose you, Jordan. Listen, I've seen too many bright kids from this neighborhood get pulled down by the weight of other people's expectations. They expect us to fail. So many of us do. They expect us to stay in our place. So many of us never leave. He stood up and walked to the wall of photos, pointing to one in particular. "Remember Marcus's older brother, James? Full scholarship to Stanford. You know what happened?" He turned it down. "Want to know why?" Jordan had a feeling he knew, but he shook his head anyway. The pressure got to him. The whispers, the accusations of thinking he's better than everyone else, the subtle threats. His own friends turned against him. By the time the scholarship came, he was convinced he didn't deserve it. Now he's working at the gas station on 23rd. Mr. Washington sat back down, his expression serious. "But you know what the real tragedy is? It wasn't just James who lost out, it was every kid who came after him, who needed to see someone make it. Every little brother or sister who needed proof that dreams can come true. Sometimes, Jordan, our success isn't just for us. It's for everyone who comes after." Jordan felt the weight of those words settle on his shoulders. But how do I handle it? The way people are looking at me now, the things they're saying. "You handle it by remembering who you are," Mr. Washington said firmly. "The same boy who helps old men with their groceries without expecting anything in return. The same boy who tutors younger kids here on weekends. The same boy who gives his corner store earnings to his mama without complaint." He leaned forward, his voice dropping. "General Park didn't choose you because you're special, Jordan. He chose you because you're real, you're authentic. Don't let anyone take that away from you." Outside the office, Jordan could hear kids playing, their laughter echoing through the building. He thought about his sisters, about how they looked at him this morning after the helicopter landed, with wonder, with possibility. "But what if I fail?" Jordan asked, voicing his deepest fear. "What if I take this opportunity and can't handle it? Everyone will say they knew it all along." Mr. Washington stood up and walked around the desk, placing a hand on Jordan's shoulder. "Son, the only real failure is not trying. General Park didn't get where he is by worrying about what others thought. Neither did any of these kids on my wall. You want to know the secret?" Jordan nodded, desperate for any wisdom that could help him navigate the situation. "The secret is to keep being yourself, even when the whole world is telling you to be something else. The same heart that made you help that old man, that's the heart that's going to carry you through this. Don't let anyone dim your light just because it makes them uncomfortable." As Jordan left the community center, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the basketball court. A group of younger kids were playing, and one of them waved excitedly at him. "Hey, Jordan, is it true a helicopter came to see you? Are you going to be rich now?" Jordan managed a smile, remembering Mr. Washington's words. "Just got an opportunity, that's all. Sometimes good things happen when you least expect them." The kid's eyes lit up, and in that moment, Jordan understood what Mr. Washington meant. Sometimes success wasn't just about one person, it was about showing others what was possible. When Jordan got home that evening, the atmosphere in the apartment had changed. His mother sat at the kitchen table with a determination in her eyes he hadn't seen in years. The folder from General Park lay open in front of her, and she'd clearly been studying every detail. "I've been thinking," she said, as Jordan hung up his jacket. "Remember what your father used to say before he passed? Sometimes God sends angels disguised as strangers." Jordan sat down across from her, noticing she'd made his favorite dinner, rice and beans with the last of their chicken. The smell filled the small kitchen, bringing back memories of better times. "The neighbors have been calling all day," she continued, her voice steady. "Mrs. Thompson came by 3 more times. Mr. Davis suddenly wants to talk about investment opportunities. Even that Marcus boy who stopped speaking to you last year came asking about you." She reached across the table, taking Jordan's hand. "But you know what I realized? All these people who never gave us a second glance before, who watched us struggle without offering help. Their opinions don't matter. What matters is this opportunity and what you choose to do with it." Jordan squeezed her hand, feeling the calluses from years of cleaning houses and working extra shifts. "But, Mama, what about the risks? People around here, they don't like when someone tries to rise above their station," she finished, a fierce look in her eyes. "That's exactly what they want us to think. They want us to be scared of standing out, of being different. Your father wasn't afraid. He worked 2 jobs to put himself through trade school, even when people said he was getting too big for his boots." She stood up and walked to the small shelf where they kept their family photos. She picked up one of Jordan's father's, taken just months before the accident that took him from them. "You know what he told me the day before he died? He said, 'Lisa, make sure our boy knows that his dreams are bigger than this neighborhood.'" Jordan felt tears stinging his eyes. They rarely talked about his father. The pain was still too raw, even after 5 years. "The helicopter landed today," his mother continued. "That wasn't just about you, Jordan. That was God showing us that sometimes blessings come in strange packages. General Park may look like just another rich man with power, but he saw something in you that I've always seen. A heart that's bigger than the circumstances we're in." From the bedroom, they heard Keisha and Aisha giggling. They were probably still drawing pictures of the helicopter, adding to the pile they'd made all afternoon. "Your sisters need to see this," his mother said softly. "They need to see that kindness can open doors, that helping others without expecting anything in return can lead to miracles. They need to see their big brother brave enough to step into his blessing." She pulled out the acceptance forms from the folder. "I've read every word, every condition. This isn't charity, Jordan. This is an investment in your future, in our family's future. General Park isn't just offering money, he's offering mentorship, guidance, a chance to be part of something bigger." Jordan looked at the forms, his heart pounding. "What about the people who'll try to stop us, the ones who'll say we're getting above ourselves?" His mother's face hardened with determination. "Let them talk. We've survived worse. When your father died, people said I couldn't raise 3 kids on my own, said I should give you up to the system. But we proved them wrong, didn't we? We stayed together. We stayed strong." She pushed the forms toward him, along with a pen. "Sometimes, baby, courage isn't about fighting. Sometimes it's about having the strength to accept help when God sends it, even if it comes in unexpected ways." Jordan picked up the pen, its weight feeling significant in his hand. Through the thin walls, he could hear the usual sounds of their building: children playing, televisions blaring, lives being lived. But something was different now. There was possibility in the air, hope in the cramped spaces between their dreams and their reality. "What would Dad say?" he asked quietly, staring at the signature line. His mother smiled, tears in her eyes. He'd say, "Son, when an angel offers you wings, you don't ask why, you learn to fly." Jordan signed the papers that evening, his hand steady despite the weight of the moment. The next morning, the world seemed different, brighter somehow, but also more dangerous. As he walked down the building's stairs, every shadow felt deeper, every glance from neighbors more pointed, every whispered conversation seeming to pause as he passed. The graffiti-covered walls that he'd grown used to over the years suddenly appeared more menacing, their messages of hopelessness and anger standing out in stark contrast to the hope that now flickered in his heart. The usual morning sounds of the building, babies crying, televisions blaring, arguments filtering through thin walls, felt like a reminder of everything he was trying to leave behind. He had barely reached the ground floor when Marcus and his crew blocked his path. They materialized from the shadows like they'd been waiting, which they probably had been. Jordan recognized all of them. Kids he'd grown up with, played basketball with, shared dreams with before the street started claiming them one by one. Marcus, especially, had been like a brother once before he dropped out of school and started running with a different crowd. Now they stood like a wall between Jordan and the exit, their expressions hard, their body language threatening. "Look who it is," Marcus sneered, his voice carrying the weight of betrayal. "The helicopter boy. Think you're better than us now, huh? Got yourself a rich sponsor and forgot where you came from?" Jordan kept his voice calm, remembering Mr. Washington's words about staying true to himself. "Just trying to make something of myself, Marcus. Same as anyone else. Same as we used to talk about, remember? Same as anyone else?" Marcus stepped closer, his breath smelling of stale cigarettes. "That's funny. I don't see helicopters landing for anyone else. What did you really do to get that old man's attention? Must be something special. Nobody gets that lucky just for carrying some groceries." The others moved closer, forming a tight circle. Jordan recognized the tactic. They'd used it before on others who tried to rise above their circumstances. The walls of bodies closing in, the intimidation, the unspoken threat of violence. He felt his heart racing, but kept his face neutral. He'd known this was coming, the neighborhood's way of pulling back anyone who tried to rise. "He helped me with my groceries." A firm voice cut through the tension like a knife. Dr. Parks or General Park stood in the building's entrance wearing simple civilian clothes and leaning on his cane. Today there was no military uniform, no medals, just a man who commanded respect through presence alone. Nothing more, nothing less. But sometimes, young man, the simplest actions reveal the most about a person's character. Marcus and his crew stepped back, their bravado faltering in the presence of real power. The general walked forward, his cane tapping sharply against the floor, each click echoing in the suddenly silent hallway. Jordan noticed how the other boys wouldn't meet the general's eyes, how their shoulders hunched slightly, how their tough facades cracked under his steady gaze. "You know," he continued, looking directly at Marcus, "I've seen your type before. In the military, in business, in life. People who are so afraid of their own potential that they try to destroy it in others. Men who've convinced themselves that dragging others down somehow lifts them up. Tell me, what exactly are you afraid of?" Marcus's face flushed, the color creeping up his neck. "I ain't afraid of nothing," he spat, but his voice wavered slightly. "No?" General Park raised an eyebrow. "Then why try to stop someone from your own neighborhood from succeeding? Unless you're afraid his success might prove that your own failures were choices, not fate, that the limitations you've accepted were self-imposed, not predetermined." The words hung in the air like smoke, heavy with truth. Jordan watched as something shifted in Marcus's expression, anger giving way to shame, then to something that looked almost like longing. He recognized that look. It was the same one he'd seen in the mirror countless times before, when dreams seemed too distant to reach. "The foundation always needs more candidates," General Park said quietly, his voice gentler now. "The door isn't closed to anyone willing to work, to show character, to help others without expecting reward. The choice is yours, just as it's always been yours." He turned to Jordan, his demeanor shifting. "Ready for your first day of training, son. The helicopter's waiting on the roof." Jordan's eyes widened in surprise. "The roof?" General Park smiled, a knowing glint in his eye. "Did you think we landed in the street yesterday just for show? No, that was to send a message to the neighborhood. Today we worked. And Jordan?" He looked back at Marcus and his crew. "Success is the best revenge, but an even better victory is showing others the way up." As the elevator ascended to the roof, Jordan felt his life shifting beneath his feet. The elevator itself was a miracle, broken for as long as he could remember, now humming smoothly as it carried them upward. General Park stood beside him, his presence both calming and intimidating. Your file shows you've never been on a helicopter before, the general said, watching the floor numbers climb. Are you afraid of heights? Jordan thought about it. Never been high enough to find out, sir. The general chuckled. Honesty. Good. That's the first rule in my organization. We deal in truth, no matter how uncomfortable it might be. The elevator doors opened to reveal the roof. Transformed from the grimy, pigeon-infested space, Jordan remembered into a pristine landing pad. The helicopter waited, its blades still, gleaming in the morning sun. Men in suits stood at attention, and Jordan recognized Mr. Reynolds among them. Before we board, General Park said, turning to face Jordan, I want you to understand something. From this moment on, your life will be different. Not just because of the opportunities you'll have, but because of the responsibilities you'll carry. He gestured to the neighborhood spread out below them. Look out there. What do you see? Jordan stepped to the edge, taking in the view. He saw the familiar streets, the worn buildings, the patches of concrete where grass should be. But from up here he also saw something else. Patterns, connections, possibilities. I see home, he said finally, but I also see potential. Exactly, General Park nodded approvingly. Most people who make it out of places like this never look back. They run as far and as fast as they can, but that's not what I'm offering you. Mr. Reynolds approached with a tablet, displaying a map of the neighborhood. Red dots marked various locations, and Jordan realized they were all community spaces. The center where Mr. Washington worked, the library, the old recreation center that had been closed for years. Phase 1 of your training isn't about getting you out, General Park continued. It's about teaching you how to give back. Each of these locations will become a foundation outpost. Education centers, job training facilities, mentorship programs. And you, Jordan, will help build them. Jordan's mind reeled at the scope of what he was hearing. But why me? I'm just a boy who helped an old man with his groceries? General Park's eyes twinkled. That boy saw someone who needed help and acted without hesitation. That's exactly the kind of leadership we need. The helicopter's pilot appeared, signaling they were ready for takeoff. As they boarded, Jordan noticed another change in the general. His movements were crisp, military precise, no sign of the frailty he'd shown on the stairs. The grocery incident was a test, Jordan realized aloud as they buckled in. Everything is a test, General Park replied, handing him a headset. Life tests us every day. Character isn't built in grand moments, Jordan. It's built in small choices, in helping others when there's nothing to gain, in doing what's right when no one's watching. The helicopter lifted off, and Jordan's stomach lurched. Below, he could see people gathering at windows pointing upward. He thought of Marcus and the others watching from the ground. Something the general had said earlier echoed in his mind. Sir, he said into the headset, about Marcus and the others. Did you mean what you said about the Foundation having room for more candidates? General Park smiled. Another test, another correct response. Leadership isn't about rising alone, Jordan. It's about building elevators for others to rise with you. As they flew over the city, Jordan saw his neighborhood shrinking behind them, but for the first time, getting distance didn't feel like escape. It felt like gaining perspective, seeing the bigger picture. Where are we going? He asked, watching the city unfold below them. To show you what's possible, General Park replied. Today, you'll meet other young people like yourself, chosen for their character, trained to make a difference. But first, we're going to visit a place very special to me. The helicopter banked east, toward the rising sun. 20 years ago, I was in your position, scared, unsure, carrying the hopes of my family and community. Today, I'm going to show you how that story ended, and how yours is just beginning. Jordan felt the weight of the moment, the responsibility and opportunity balanced on a knife's edge. Behind them, his neighborhood grew smaller, but his dreams were expanding with every mile. The helicopter landed on a rooftop helipad of what appeared to be a massive medical research facility. The building gleamed in the morning sun, its modern architecture a stark contrast to the neighborhood they'd left behind. As they disembarked, Jordan noticed the name on the building, Park Institute for Medical Innovation. 20 years ago, General Park said as they walked toward a roof access door, this was an abandoned warehouse in one of the city's worst areas. Now it's one of the leading medical research facilities in the country, specializing in treatments for underserved communities. Inside, they took an elevator down. Through glass walls, Jordan saw laboratories where scientists worked, their white coats like beacons of progress. They passed research rooms filled with advanced equipment and halls lined with photos of smiling children, before and after pictures of successful treatments. Every child treated here receives care regardless of their ability to pay, General Park explained. But this isn't charity. It's an investment in human potential, just like what I'm doing with you. They stopped at a large window overlooking a children's ward. Inside, kids played and received treatment, their faces bright despite their illnesses. Jordan noticed something striking. The medical staff was diverse, reflecting the communities they served. Many of our doctors and researchers came from neighborhoods like yours, General Park said, watching Jordan's reaction. They were chosen the same way you were, through small moments that revealed their character. A teenager who organized a food drive, a young girl who started a reading program for elderly neighbors, a boy who helped an old man with his groceries. They continued walking, entering a conference room where Mr. Reynolds waited with several other people. Maps and documents covered the tables. This is Phase 1, General Park said, gesturing to the materials. We're not just offering you an education, Jordan, we're offering you a chance to help rebuild your community. While you study, you'll also learn how to implement programs like this in your neighborhood. Jordan picked up one of the documents. Plans for converting abandoned buildings into medical clinics, educational centers, and job training facilities. This is overwhelming, he admitted. Good, General Park smiled. It should be. If it wasn't, we wouldn't be thinking big enough. But you won't be doing it alone. The door opened and several young people entered, all around Jordan's age from different backgrounds. He recognized one of them from the Foundation's brochure. Meet your cohort, General Park said. Like you, they were chosen for their character, their potential, and their desire to lift others as they rise. Together, you'll learn not just how to succeed, but how to create success for others. A young woman stepped forward, extending her hand. I'm Sarah, she said. 2 years ago, I was where you are now. Scared, overwhelmed, wondering if I deserved this chance, but that's not the right question. What is? Jordan asked, shaking her hand. The question isn't whether we deserve it, she replied. It's what we'll do with it. General Park didn't choose us because we were special. He chose us because we were willing to help others without being special. The others nodded in agreement, and Jordan felt something shift inside him. The weight of responsibility remained, but now it felt shared, supported by others who understood the journey. Today, General Park announced, you'll see all our facilities. You'll meet people who started where you are and now run departments, manage programs, save lives, but more importantly, you'll begin to understand why you're here. He turned to Jordan. Remember how you felt helping me with those groceries? That instinct to help, regardless of reward? That's what we're going to amplify. We're not just going to change your life, Jordan. We're going to change thousands of lives through you. Looking around the room at his new peers, at the plans for transformation, at the evidence of what was possible, Jordan felt the last of his doubts falling away. This wasn't just an opportunity for escape. It was a chance to become part of something larger than himself. Through the windows, he could see his neighborhood in the distance, but from here, it didn't look like a place to escape from. It looked like a place waiting for transformation. And for the first time, he could clearly see his role in that transformation. The helicopter ride back to Jordan's neighborhood felt different. The afternoon sun cast long shadows over the city as they approached the now familiar rooftop landing pad. But this time, Jordan's mind was racing with possibilities, plans, and purpose. "Before we land," General Park said through the headset, "look down there." He pointed to a large abandoned warehouse 3 blocks from Jordan's building. "That's going to be our first project. By this time next year, it'll be a state-of-the-art community medical center." Jordan studied the building, seeing it with new eyes. He'd passed it countless times, another symbol of urban decay. Now he saw its potential, just as General Park had seen potential in him. "Your training starts tomorrow," the general continued. "But tonight, you have an important task." He handed Jordan an envelope. "Inside are acceptance letters for 5 more candidates from your neighborhood. You choose them." Jordan's eyes widened. "Me? But how do I—" "Trust your instincts," General Park interrupted. "The same instincts that made you help an old man with his groceries. Look for people who help others without expecting reward. People who maintain their dignity despite their circumstances. People who haven't lost hope." The helicopter touched down, and Jordan saw a crowd had gathered again. But this time he spotted Marcus among them, standing slightly apart, his expression thoughtful rather than hostile. "Sir," Jordan said, glancing at Marcus, "I think I already know one candidate." General Park smiled. "I thought you might. Remember, Jordan, true leaders don't fear competition, they create it. They don't guard their success, they share it." As they exited the helicopter, Jordan's mother was waiting with his sisters. Their faces beamed with pride, but there was something else too. Understanding. They'd seen where he'd gone, what he was becoming part of. "Mrs. Williams," General Park addressed his mother, "your son had quite a day. Would you like to hear about the changes coming to your neighborhood?" Jordan watched as the general explained their plans to his mother, saw her eyes fill with tears of joy, saw his sisters' faces light up with possibility. Around them, the crowd listened, hope spreading like a contagion. "One more thing," General Park announced, raising his voice to address everyone. "Starting next week, we'll be conducting interviews for construction and staffing positions. Every project we build here will be built by people from this community. Every program we run will be staffed by residents. This isn't about changing your neighborhood. It's about giving you the tools to change it yourselves." The murmur that went through the crowd was different from this morning. Where there had been suspicion, now there was possibility. Where there had been resentment, now there was anticipation. Jordan felt a tap on his shoulder. It was Marcus. "Hey," Marcus said, his voice low. "About this morning. I was wrong. I've never seen anybody make it out of here without forgetting where they came from. But you're not leaving, are you? You're coming back." Jordan pulled out the envelope General Park had given him, removed one of the acceptance letters, and handed it to Marcus. "I'm not just coming back," he said. "I'm bringing others with me. If you're ready to be part of something bigger than yourself." Marcus stared at the letter, his hands trembling slightly. "Why me? After how I treated you?" "Because everyone deserves a second chance," Jordan replied. "And because you're still the same guy who used to talk about making things better around here. Remember those plans we made when we were kids? About fixing up the neighborhood? Now we can actually do it." As the crowd dispersed, Jordan stood with his family, Marcus and General Park, watching the sun set over their neighborhood. The buildings were still worn, the streets still cracked, the challenges still real. But something had changed. Not just in their circumstances, but in their hearts. "Tomorrow," General Park said, "we begin the real work. Not just of building buildings, but of building hope. Are you ready?" Jordan looked at his mother, his sisters, at Marcus clutching his acceptance letter, at the neighborhood he'd always called home. "Yes," he said, "we're ready." And for the first time in years, the future looked not just possible, but promising. A month passed, bringing dramatic changes to the neighborhood. The abandoned warehouse was already undergoing transformation, its walls echoing with the sound of construction workers, all local residents who'd been trained and hired by the foundation. Jordan split his time between his advanced studies and community development work, learning everything from urban planning to public health administration. But most importantly, he watched his community transform. The 5 candidates he'd chosen, including Marcus, had thrown themselves into their new roles with determination. Marcus, particularly, had surprised everyone by showing a natural talent for organization and leadership. "You see that?" General Park said one morning, pointing to a group of younger kids watching the construction through the chain-link fence. "That's why we landed the helicopter that day. Hope needs spectacle sometimes. Those children aren't just watching a building go up. They're watching their future being built." Jordan nodded, remembering how he used to walk past the abandoned warehouse, seeing only decay. Now he understood that change started with vision, the ability to see possibility where others saw only problems. The community center had become their base of operations, with Mr. Washington coordinating youth programs. The once quiet building now buzzed with activity: job training classes, tutoring sessions, health screenings. Jordan's sisters spent their afternoons there, soaking up knowledge and dreaming bigger dreams than they'd ever dared before. His mother had taken on a leadership role too, coordinating with other parents to ensure the programs met community needs. The woman who had once hidden bills under newspapers now sat confidently in meetings with city officials, her voice strong as she advocated for her neighbors. "Jordan," she said one evening, after a particularly successful community meeting, "do you remember what your father used to say about angels in disguise?" "Yes," Jordan replied, helping her organize papers, "that sometimes God sends them to test our hearts." She smiled, looking years younger than she had just a month ago. "Well, I think he sent us more than one. Not just General Park, but you too. Your kindness that day opened a door for our whole community." The neighborhood was changing in smaller ways too. The suspicious glances had turned to respectful nods. The whispers were no longer about who was getting above themselves, but about who might be next to receive an opportunity. People began picking up trash, planting flowers in empty lots, taking pride in their surroundings. One afternoon, Jordan found Marcus organizing a group of younger kids to paint a mural on the community center wall. The design showed a helicopter flying over their neighborhood, but instead of casting a shadow, it cast light. "Remember when we thought anyone who made it out was a sellout?" Marcus asked, watching the kids work. "Now look at us. We're not getting out. We're building up." Jordan's own studies were intense. General Park had arranged for top tutors, and Jordan spent hours each day preparing for college. But unlike traditional education, every lesson was tied to practical application in their community projects. "Theory without practice is empty," General Park often said, "and practice without theory is blind. You're learning both because you'll need both to create lasting change." The foundation's influence spread beyond their immediate neighborhood. Other communities began sending representatives to learn about their program. Jordan found himself giving tours, explaining their model, watching understanding dawn in visitors' eyes as they realized that transformation was possible in their own neighborhoods. One evening, as Jordan walked home from another long day of study and community work, he passed the spot where he'd first helped General Park with his groceries. An elderly woman was struggling with her bags, and before Jordan could move to help, he saw 2 young boys rush to assist her. "Let us help you, ma'am," one said, echoing Jordan's words from that fateful day. The woman smiled, thanking them as they carried her bags. Jordan watched them, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. The cycle was continuing, kindness breeding kindness, hope breeding hope. At home, he found a new set of acceptance letters on his desk, waiting for his nominations. General Park's note read simply, "The work continues. Choose wisely." Jordan looked out his window at the neighborhood he'd known all his life. Construction lights illuminated the warehouse project, a beacon in the growing darkness. Somewhere, a helicopter's rotors thumped through the night sky, and Jordan smiled, remembering how that sound had once meant trouble, but now carried the promise of possibility. The transformation wasn't just about buildings or programs. It was about changing hearts, changing minds, changing expectations. One act of kindness had started a chain reaction that was still growing, still spreading, still lifting people up. And this was just the beginning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.